Any advice and information from this podcast is general only. It has been prepared without taking into account your individual circumstances and needs. Before acting on any advice from this podcast, you should assess and seek advice on whether it is appropriate for your needs, financial situation, and investment objectives.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode.
All right. So, J-Mac, if we are doing another episode, that means we are essentially still employed.
Are we legit? Yeah.
We haven't been sacked yet, but you never know. It could be around the corner. The way it depends on how these podcasts go. So if you're out there and you're a fan, definitely give us, another listen. I don't know if we're in that. Are we able to say give it a like or subscribe? Hell no, I don't know.
Can we do that? Yeah.
We'll just we'll enjoy the podcast train as long as it lasts. So here we go.
We're on dividends part 2, are we?
Part 2, yes. What are dividends? So we didn't want to drag it out for at least a couple of hours. We just thought we'd keep it short and sharp and entertaining for everyone listening out there. But essentially part 2, carrying on from our last discussion, which was a big introduction on what dividends are, some considerations, why companies distribute them, what do they mean? Does every company essentially pay them? Do they have to pay them? When do they pay them? How do they pay them? All these things we essentially chatted about or discussed in our last episode. But this one, we're deep diving just a little bit more. So strap yourselves in, goggles, mouthguard, headgear.
Exciting stuff.
And here we go. So, Jessie, these dividends, it seems like I've just unearthed this newfound cheat code of passive income of this. Hold on, if I buy shares, potentially these companies are going to pay me a dividend, which is like either I get to buy more shares or they pay cash into my bank, and I haven't had to work for them. If they make profit, I make profit.
While you sleep.
Yeah, money while I sleep, but I don't even work for the company. I might not even like the company, but I could just have some of their shares and they pay me money. Yeah, okay. So what are some of the other pros and cons of dividends or dividend investing? I guess what are some of the other considerations? Like, why should I just buy a company that pays big dividend yield, or should I why should I buy a company that pays a small dividend yield? What are the differences? Surely easy math goes, well, if one company's paying a dividend yield of 7% and another company's paying a dividend yield of 1%, surely I'd go for the 8%er. What's the difference? How is it going to help me with my financial plan and investing?
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on your situation. If you go for the 7% dividend yield, sounds very attractive, but just considering that, on most of your portfolio for that company, you have to pay tax on those dividends, like we mentioned last time. You have to kind of put them as your taxable income, even if you reinvest them. So
okay, so yeah, we did talk about the taxation a little bit side before, didn't we? Yeah, and is that sort of further going into both your plan and possibly where the company is at in its development stage? So is that right? Like one company might pay a fat dividend, but it's definitely like a well-established, well-oiled machine. It's been consistent for years. It's been around for very reliable versus a company that might be paying very minimal dividends, but it's still kind of in the growth stages.
Yeah.
Okay. So because we talked about in the last episode, you're a shareholder and you're essentially potentially benefiting from the share price growth and the dividends. So does that kind of relate? Does that sort of answer that question generally, where a company isn't really that bad if it's only paying a tiny amount of dividends?
Yeah, so it could be paying a small amount of dividends but having a large amount of growth.
Yeah, okay. So
which you kind of see overseas sometimes. And
right, and that could outweigh that 3, 4, 5% in dividend yield, because if the company's really got all its processes down pat, it's making heaps of revenue and profit, the share price could be growing at 10 or 20% per year.
Instead of the 7%.
Okay, I know what you mean. So it's, I guess, do we sort of liken that to maybe think of, I guess we throw some Australian companies out there everyone's familiar with, whether it's CBA or BHP. They're very well established. They've been around for a while. They're worth a squillion. They pay a pretty consistent dividend depending on their market cycles, whether it's commodities or banking, compared to, say, like your smaller companies that are just up and coming. And I guess, I like to think of a few big ones. I know well back in the day, we all sort of know about that when Afterpay kind of kicked off. There was a period there that was in the finance, or you could say a little bit of tech sector, but it was only worth a few dollars a share. It was paying pretty much no dividends. CBA was paying decent dividends.
Yeah.
But I guess if you'd bought into Afterpay in the infancy, I guess its capital growth over the next few years pretty much blew CBA out of the water. Okay, so that's the difference between a passive income provided in dividends versus capital growth. Yeah, all right. And does that sort of tie back to, hey, it's kind of a horses for courses thing. It comes down to your plan, and you mentioned before where you are in life.
Yeah.
What are you, 21 versus someone who's like 60, retired, not too fussed on capital growth, but wants consistent income. Is that right? Okay.
Then franking credits, I guess, come into the mix.
Yeah. So is that okay? I think we're going to cross that in a second, but that sort of comes into it. You're right. So when dividends are paid, are franking credits applied to all dividends? Like, do all dividends pay 100% franking credits or not?
No, it depends on the company, and they'll kind of tell you their franking credit percentage.
Yeah, okay. I've seen that whether it's on the news when it's announced they release their statement, hey, we're going to pay dividends. It's going to be 100% franking or 30% franking. Okay, so it differs between companies.
What does 100% franking mean? Old Frank?
Frank the Tank. No, so essentially franking credits we talked about in the last episode, we touched on sort of like imputation credits. So in Australia, companies generally will pay a tax rate of 30%. The ATO, Australian Taxation Office, doesn't want to double tax us compared to, say, America as an example. So when the company's already paid 30%, they pass the profits or the dividends onto the shareholder. The shareholder won't then pay another 30% tax or whatever. They'll essentially get a credit. So let's just say a company makes $1 profit. They pay 30 cents in tax.
Yeah.
And they pay 70 cents dividend to the shareholder. So the whole dollar is reported to the ATO, to the shareholder, and then the shareholder will then get a 30% or a 30-cent credit back, or a franking credit, or as an offset.
Yeah.
So it's essentially like an offset is kind of like a refund. So if you're under the 30% tax bracket, you may get potentially a refund from that franking credit, because not everyone pays an average amount of 30% tax.
So if I'm a retiree and say I'm not working and I get, maybe I have CBA or CommBank and it has a high dividend yield or lots of dividends, would it then be beneficial for me to have something like CBA where I get a lot of dividends so I could get more franking credits?
Potentially, yeah. Look, it's not all about the franking credits, but it's definitely a deal sweetener, especially in Australia, because, let's just throw it out there, a retiree, they might be pulling, they're over 60, they might be pulling, their main income might come from their super pension, which is tax-free, and then they might have a heap of, as you mentioned, CBA shares on the side that pays them another 10 grand. Ooh, I need to get on that job train. Anyway, because their income from their super pension is tax-free, they're getting, or maybe 10 grand is not a good example. Let's just say it's maybe 30 grand. Because it's an investment outside of super, it's deemed as taxable income. They won't pay that much tax on it. But because of the franking credits, it could end up being that they get a tax credit.
Is that because the company, like CBA, has already paid their 30% tax?
Yeah, and especially, let's just say the CBA shares have 100% franking credits.
Yeah.
They will get 30% back essentially at the end of that.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's kind of a bit of a deal sweetener. On on holding some of those shares. But I guess it comes back to sort of the questions we raised before. There's a bit of why, and I guess a bit of strategic outlook on, hey, should I be buying companies that pay this fat dividend? And there's a lot of intricacies that go into there, because there are definitely some companies that outline that their dividends are 10, 15%. Remember we talked about in the first part one, it depends on their share price and it depends on the company itself. Some companies are more proven, or provide a better track history of providing dividends than others.
Yeah.
Some it might be irregular. They might have a really good financial year where they make heaps of profit, issue some dividends, and the next year not so good. Whereas some of your well-established sort of companies might be pretty consistent year on year in providing some dividends. So
yeah, right.
That's interesting sort of question on that, but it's then again it comes down to your why, how long you want to hold these investments for. Maybe it fits into your age, your strategic outline, why you want that income, or do you want that growth? But there's definitely a difference between, and it's not all bad if a company doesn't pay them any dividends. As we talked about in part one, they could be holding those profits to reinvest back in their company. So yes, they're not giving you any dividends, but they're essentially using that squillion dollars to reinvest in the company. Think of it as a capital reinjection kind of thing to buy, more factories, more research, that kind of thing.
More growth.
Yeah, okay. So
and is there any risks of like reinvesting your dividends? Say if I have those CBA or Commonwealth Bank shares and I have other things in my portfolio, is there any risk of having like Commonwealth Bank being a high dividend or, reinvesting a lot of dividends back into that? Yeah,
good question. Look, part one, we talked about the pros of dividend reinvestment. Some are being it's kind of an automated sort of setup. Once you get paid a dividend, you buy more shares in that company. But what that ends up being, say you let it ride for a couple of years or whatever, you might find you might start owning more and more of that company. And maybe within your portfolio, you might not want to hold a big percentage of banking shares or mining shares. So as your dividend reinvestment sort of keeps kicking along, it's changing the ratio of your portfolio. Let's just say you want it to be diversified of 50% banking and 50% mining, as an example.
Yeah.
The banking's doing big dividends, you're doing the dividend reinvestment. A year or two later, you might find that your portfolio is 70% banking and 30% mining, as a general example, which means you're a bit more exposed to the banking sector.
Yeah.
And look, let's just say then the banking sector takes a hit, whether there's another, Royal Commission into fees charged to dead people or, services unrendered, that kind of thing. Because you've got a bigger holding, you've got bigger exposure. You could potentially if there's a bit of a downfall in that sector, it could affect you a bit more. So there's some risk there with the dividend reinvestment within your portfolio, but I guess it comes also down to your overall strategy. But there is, and again, it comes down to sort of your plan and keeping an eye on how your portfolio is kind of, managed or invested, and you can kind of massage it from there. Yeah.
Okay. I feel like I've had clients kind of have a bit of a shock when, they're starting investing and they don't realize you have to kind of pay tax on the dividends.
What? Just older clients, or even like if you had, young or mid-aged, whether it's 20, 30, 40-year-olds, maybe like the inheritance piece, Nan might have left them a $500,000 portfolio of bank shares.
Wouldn't that be nice? Great Aunt Betty or something leaving you some money. It's the dream.
Wish I was the favourite grandson. Not quite. Not this black sheep. So I guess you've sort of come across that with maybe some of your clients where they've had a bit of a windfall, whether, like an inheritance. And then they've found out that, hey, these shares that I now own pay a dividend, which is great, but I just got slapped with a tax bill in July. Where the hell did that come from?
Yeah, it'd be a bit of a shock. I mean, a good shock getting that amount of money, but
tax means you're earning more
yeah.
to a certain degree.
And a lot of people, you know, if they inherit it, maybe they've never invested in shares before and they don't understand yet that there's tax on those dividends. So if you inherit like a $400,000 portfolio of shares, maybe with that Combank or, you know, CBA shares that are doing a lot of dividends, when you receive them and your next tax return, you might, you know, get an extra $5,000-$10,000 tax bill to pay tax on those dividends where you didn't have before. So it's like almost a bit unnatural to not start from zero and all of a sudden you've got 400,000 you've got to pay tax on you know, the dividends that are in there.
So as an example, Jessie, how does it sort of work? Let's just say easy maths, I'm earning $100,000 a year. I have a savings account that I earn $5,000 a year. And I also have then just got a fat dividend from my deceased nan where I got paid a dividend of $30,000 a year. How does it all sort of work in tax? Are they all taxed separately and I'm just a normal employee? I don't have any trust or company structures or anything. Is it? Yep. How is it taxed? How does it work?
So if you're earning $100,000 a year and you get, you know, $30,000 of dividends, essentially it adds to your taxable income. So in the eyes of the ATO, you're earning $130,000.
Okay.
And you get taxed at your marginal tax rate, whether that's 32% or whatever it is. But then, yeah, like you said, on the bank account, if you've got 20 grand in there, then again, that adds,
like the interest.
Was it 20 grand in interest?
5 grand in interest, yeah.
5 grand in interest, sorry. So then that adds again to your taxable
on top.
income. So you're at 135,000 and you're like, what is going on?
Yeah, okay. So it is a good problem to have. You just got to be cognizant that you may get a bill at the end of the year. Potentially there's some franking credits attached to it, but it's just if you're a normal sort of employee or wage earner or salary earner, your your dividends are going to go on top of any other income streams you have. That's what the ATO is going to see.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting there. Yep. And that's just at your marginal sort of tax rate. There's no, I don't know, you don't get any offsets or anything. Besides franking credits, you don't get any sneaky kind of, I don't know, 10% because it was grandma's inheritance or?
No.
Okay.
But hopefully you get some franking credits in there. Good old Frank comes in and franking credits essentially add to your taxable income and then offset tax and later. It's a little bit complicated, but they're really good to have if you have Frank on your side, franking credits.
So if I'm looking at getting big in this whole investment game, whether it's shares, I guess that's what we're sort of talking about, and I'm maybe more so after I like the sound of this dividend thing, is there another way I can buy shares to kind of help alleviate tax? Let's just say I'm ripping and gripping it and maybe I make 250 or 300 grand a year. So my average tax rate's say 35%. You know, anyone that earns over 190,000 sort of slip into that 45% marginal tax rate.
Yep.
So is there any other ways how else can I hold shares that maybe just help me with the tax burden?
Yay, less tax. There's a few different ways you can hold your investment. You can either hold it personally, so as most people do, you know, just like we said, adds to your taxable income. So
starting up an investment account just under my name and my tax file number. Okay.
Yep. You can hold it in a trust.
Yep.
Which essentially means you might be the trustee and you can kind of nominate who your dividends get taxed to.
Okay.
So that could be...
Have we done an episode on that?
I don't think we have,
Oh.
Here we go.
And the snowball continues.
Yeah.
Okay. Watch the space, listeners.
Yeah.
Strap yourselves in again.
So, I mean, if you're allocating that to someone, say your partner's not working, you know, the first $18,000 is tax-free.
Give or take. Yeah, okay.
So
that's a little bit handy, especially, if you might have inherited that big. And I guess we might cover that in another episode of setting up different, whether it's a trust or a bucket company, just depending on what your income is, what your marginal tax rate is. If you've got any other beneficiaries there you want to share your profits with, that could help alleviate that tax burden. It's a bit handy. I guess Packer talked about it decades ago about, you know, it's a bit crazy. I don't want to quote it word for word, but no one in Australia likes paying more tax than they have to, especially if they don't like how the government spends it. Story for another time.
Yes.
Wait, is that on our other podcasts? No, I was joking.
Another one?
No, we'll stay out of the politics side of it. Okay. But is there a way of holding shares, say buying shares, that comes back into the plan of maybe that helps answer my question of what kind of shares do I want to buy? Do I want to buy one that pays, fat dividends, or maybe one that's not paying as many dividends but seems to have a pretty good track history of share price growth? Could that possibly sort of help me with my plan in my age now, whether I'm in my 40s? Do I want, because I think you mentioned in the last episode, you don't pay tax on the capital growth, do you?
Not unless you sell your shares. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe some of those companies that don't pay a big dividend but are growing in share price could potentially benefit me more, because maybe I want to tap into them or sell them down in 10 years when I retire, or, and I quit my 300 grand a year job.
Yeah. Again, you could sell them when you're maybe retired or not earning any money. So again, you reduce your tax bill.
Yeah. Okay. That's so it sort of comes into the plan and the strategy side of things. Right. Is that why people come see you?
Come see us, yes.
Oh, plural.
You too,
well
Yannick.
Yep. Okay, I can definitely talk you through it.
He's all over it.
Yeah, so that's really interesting.
And then another option is holding it in a company as well.
Okay, is that going to be another episode for another time?
Yeah.
Right. That the warning order's out there, ladies and gentlemen. So you better stick around for the next episode, because that could potentially be it. We'll see what we can do.
So Yannick, what is a share buyback?
Good question, J-Mac. Always with the tough questions. Okay. So share buyback. Look, some companies, when they've made profits, not all of them have to elect to do a dividend. Sometimes how they can reward shareholders with a share buyback. So they might offer to essentially buy shares off shareholders at a competitive price. Because when dividend information is released and dividend reinvestments happen in the share market, a company might have 1 million shares issued out to shareholders. A lot of them then opt to do a dividend reinvestment, and then the next thing you know, there's essentially more shares in the market, which could reduce or dilute the share price, because you've gone from, say, 1 million shares, but now there's 1.1 million shares out there in shares outstanding.
Gotcha.
So that can sometimes reduce the value of the shares. Companies can opt to potentially do a share buyback or share repurchase. So it's the company going back to the shareholders and offering to buy back those shares. So the company then keeps a bigger holding, or they keep their majority holding of those shares, and it lets them kind of reward the shareholder maybe by, yes, they might experience some capital growth because they've essentially had their shares bought off them, but it's providing them some sort of, cash reimbursement for holding them. And it also then reduces the amount of shares on the market as well. So instead of a dividend reinvestment where more shares are created, it's kind of the opposite. Now that the company's holding more of its shares, and it's potentially increasing the earnings per share of the stock.
Yeah, right.
So general outline, I suppose, on that one is a company's got to be in a pretty strong position with sort of net cash flow to be able to offer its shareholders, hey, we want to buy back X million shares, which might cost X million dollars. Companies have got to have the cash on hand to sort of buy that, and then also have strategic planning in place where they've got money left over for anything that changes in the market or whatever. But that's sort of the option. So it's not always about the dividend. It can also be about a share buyback that produces value back to the shareholder.
Is that more popular in Australia or overseas?
Good question. I don't think so. I think some Australian companies do it. I think it is a bit more popular maybe in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Berkshire Hathaway definitely does it a bit more, because I guess in the US there's that double tax sort of, and the share buyback sort of helps investors not get double taxed. We're in Australia, not as much because we get the franking credits most of the time.
We have frank.
Thanks, ATO. Usually they'll sting you for everything else, but they won't double sting you for dividends. So that's the win.